I believe that to this day, the U.S. government and probably other world governments use the fog of UFO and UAP lore to hide actual domestically created human technology that is really advanced to the point where we don't even know what we have flying in our own skies.
I think UFOs are real. I think there is a possibility that non-human intelligence has come to the planet at one point, and maybe our government does know about it.
There is something out there that is so significantly more advanced than us. They've got to be ass if they're not helping us now.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Before we dive into today's episode, I'd just like to let you know about something that we've been working on behind the scenes at Unveiled. We are preparing to launch the very first Unveiled Live Summit, which will be taking place later this year in Montreal. And here's the thing, I don't want this to be just another boring UAP summit like you guys have attended in the past. I want this to be something that everybody wants to attend, where the community can come together to hang out, watch some exclusive films, and see the Unveiled podcast recorded live. But in order to do that, I need your help to design it. So I have dropped a link to a questionnaire in the description for this podcast. You can also access that by clicking the QR code that you see on the screen if you're watching this on YouTube. And it contains questions like what kind of guests you'd be interested in seeing, the topics that we should cover, and just the general vibe of the event. If you can take 1 minute to fill that out for me, it would really help me to show my bosses that this is actually a good idea and that we can put together the type of event that you want to see. So if you can help me out with that, that would be amazing. And now, without further ado, on with the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to Watch Mojo's Unveiled podcast. I'm your host, Rob, and with me today we have two very special guests. We've got friend of the show, documentary filmmaker Darcy Weir. How are you, Darcy?
Good, thanks, Rob. How are you?
Doing very well, thank you. I'm also very excited to introduce Jeremy McGowan, U.S. Air Force veteran and a prominent figure in the UAP research community. Jeremy, it's nice to meet you. Thanks for joining us as well.
You as well, Rob. Thank you. Happy to be here.
All right. Well, the reason that we're gathered here is because Darcy has just released a new film called Dark Alliance: The Next Generation. And this is a follow-up to Darcy's previous Dark Alliance film, which we discussed on another episode. And that one kind of followed the story of Corey Goode, a very infamous figure right now in the UAP community, his rise and fall.
A bit about David Wilcock too.
Some other figures were also involved. Basically the resulting admission that this whole secret space program charade was pretty much a complete fabrication, but the story didn't end there. There's a few other whistleblowers who have stepped forward more recently claiming to have been part of similar programs. And so, Darcy, let me just start by asking you, what was the reaction to that initial film? And what made you decide that it was worth pursuing again for a follow-up?
I think it's had a positive reaction from people that kind of live within reality and logic, that, you know, that sort of wooey new age secret space program probably doesn't exist. But, you know, you get a mix. You get some people that are firmly entrenched in that belief system, and you get some angry emails and stuff like that. That's fine. You know, people can believe whatever they want to believe. The reason why I made the follow-up was because I wanted to sort of build out that this story didn't end with Corey Goode and David Wilcock's exploits. It actually started with some other people that were talking about it, like Randy Kramer, Tony Rodriguez, and, you know, expands on to eventually adding Chris O'Connor and all these like JP and these guys that say they've also been to space and fought in alien wars, or, you know, in Chris's story, he's more of like a United Nations ambassador, social worker or something in space. So I just wanted to cover that, it expanded. And I think one of the major propagators of this storyline still, somebody who's been holding up the whole spaceship and keeping it in that world of conspiracy that people are living in, is really Michael Salla. So we went back and we covered kind of like his rise to fame, and then some really wild claims he's made in the past. And that's where Jeremy comes in, because he picks apart a lot of those claims, like the fact that we invaded Iraq for a Stargate. And, it kind of starts in places like that. But if you go on social media now, even in the past 60 days with the invasion of Venezuela, Michael Salla and one of these secret space program guys, JP, were saying the real reason we invaded Venezuela was for gold beneath a secret pyramid they found at the southern border of Venezuela and Brazil. Wild stuff,
Yeah, well, I think that one of the reasons why people actually believe some of these stories is because they are grounded in something truthful. They're attached to something truthful. Like Venezuela, something did happen, but then there's always a secret motive, like a different scenario. So Jeremy, why is it that people fall for these things? Is it the distrust in government that a lot of people have? I know it was, 9/11 was actually mentioned in the documentary as being a catalyst for this, like distrust in government. And then a lot of these stories started coming forward. So how do people manage to, actually convince people of these things?
We've entered an era in, I don't even want to say American society, but basically in world society, where we have become so intellectually lazy that it is much more comfortable to allow other people to think for us. And if you have a rudimentary belief in something, and there sits somebody else who is telling you what you want to hear, you're going to believe it, especially if what they're saying has some modicum of truth to it. Most of Salla's stories evolve from some sort of historical action. I mean, you're talking about where he's talking about the secret Antarctica base. I mean, there was a German Antarctic expedition back in 1938, 1939, but it was really short. It was aimed at scouting for whales, not building secret layers. It used one ship and I think 3 airplane and maybe a handful of people. So they did go to Antarctica, but there was no collaboration with Nordics and no building a secret alien base. And then with the what Darcy touched on with Venezuela, you've got a huge military operation which is taking place under the cover of darkness. We're using potential weapon systems that have never seen the light of day before, and we infill and exfil in just a matter of hours, and extraordinarily rendition a sitting president of a foreign country, and the entire world stood up and was like, wow. But it wasn't about aliens. Maduro is a person who used his security forces, his intelligence agencies, his judiciary, his armed paramilitary thugs, and systematically unleashed murder, torture, rape, forced disappearances, and he weaponized starvation. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend that we were completely altruistic and totally benevolent and we went in there to liberate people. There were resources involved. There was the shoring up of the petrodollar involved, but it was a grand collaboration of perfect timing. You had the humanitarian aspect, you had the US currency tanking, you had the Chinese bases and their drone bases being built in Venezuela, which could reach the coast of Florida in 30 minutes. All of these things just coalesced at the right time. And we went in and put a stop to it. It had nothing to do with alien collaboration or alien technology. But because we operate in secrecy with military operations, people's mind gravitate towards fantasy.
And you're half Venezuelan, right, Jeremy?
Yes, I am half Venezuelan. I've got both a U.S. birth certificate and a Venezuelan birth certificate. And my biological father was the Venezuelan ambassador to the United States back in the late 60s, early 70s, and was actually exiled from Venezuela.
Wow, so I guess it's kind of close to home.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so it must affect you somewhat differently when you hear stories like this being propagated that kind of like take the actual events and like put a wild spin on them.
When you have somebody that is lying on stage and converting the killing fields of these impoverished barrios into an alien expedition, it is not only insulting, it's angering. Because these people are just simply profiteering on lies.
Yeah, is it really all about profiteering, or is there some sort of delusion at play here? Because that's something that I'm wondering about. Like these guys that you've spoken to in the film, Darcy, Tony Rodriguez, Chris O'Connell, is it, or O'Connor?
O'Connor,
right. They say these things, these stories with such straight faces at times. Is it something that they actually believe, or is it really just profit motivation, or is there some sort of like ulterior motive behind it? What do you think?
You know, I can't speak for them. I can't say that they believe or disbelieve what they're saying. They seem genuine in what they're saying. So all I can say is I don't believe them, but you know, to each their own. And there is a huge group within the West, in the UK and Australia and the United States and Canada, that follow these secret space program whistleblowers. You know, they the media empire that really launched all of this was Gaia TV, and they are still platforming them every year as every year goes by. I think it's one of their number one themes to cover, other than the Nazca mummies. So you got to wonder what's going on there. But when you watch what these people say and do around real life events and, you know, historical things that should take precedence in our minds somewhat, and they spin it, it's kind of like watching a really bad infomercial where a guy just won't let the infomercial end, and he says, "But wait, there's more." You know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was just wondering what you think this says about human psychology, that so many people are willing to latch on to things like this. Jeremy, let's let you answer that one.
I think we're too comfortable as a society. A lot of these things, the tropes, have been around for a century. I mean, we've got, you know, Jules Verne shooting a ballistic rocket to the moon, and people going and visiting the moon and things like that. But it was received as what it was, fiction. But then as society becomes more dependent on technology and less dependent on self-survival and less dependent on being held accountable for one's own actions, then it becomes easier for somebody to become a voice of, for lack of a better word, craziness. And it becomes less stigmatized to go out and say, hey, I believe that the earth is flat. Oh, well, now here's an entire digital group of hundreds of people who are thinking just like me. And then that leaks out and it becomes more prevalent throughout other groups, and it just propagates. And people are within humanity, there are brilliant individuals, but as a collection, we have become a group of really stupid animals, and we have lost quite a bit of the ability for critical thought.
Why do you think that is? What's the deeper reason for that? Is it really technology based that too much is being done for us? We don't have to think as much for ourselves. There's no struggle anymore. Is that what it stems from?
Don't take this the wrong way, but if I asked you to explain to me how a digital flat screen television works, would you be able to explain that to me?
No idea.
Okay. I wouldn't be able to either. But it's indicative of the situation that we have all of this technology that we're using on a daily basis. We're taking it for granted. We have no idea how the television itself works. There are people that do because they designed it, they built it. But the general population has no idea of how the television works. But now, if you are in a group of 12 other people and there's somebody that you're trying to impress and somebody asks you how to explain how the television works, you're going to be put on the spot. You're going to come up with a story. And because you're looked at as the expert for that question, other people who have no idea how the television works are going to take what you've said for real. And that story becomes propagated. They believed what you just created. You didn't do it for fame or fortune. You did it because your butt was on the line at the moment. But now you're a television expert.
Yeah, I think that analogy that you just gave works really well, especially for like how Michael Salla launched that whole "we invaded Iraq for Stargates" story, right? Because everybody watched the invasion of Iraq happen and then no WMDs being found. And instead of being like, well, there you go, our government is corrupt, and they screwed up, and they've obviously shown their hand here that they just invaded Iraq for some other reason, but they blamed it on WMDs, right? Weapons of mass destruction. Then you got people like Salla that come in and say, but wait, there's more. And for people that couldn't settle on just that it was maybe for an access of power within the Middle East and oil control and stuff like that, the whole sort of Wu-Tang clan settles on his theory that it's just an invasion for Stargates, which it's
not even a wonderfully good story. I mean, he basically took the recycled trope from, the film in 1994. We invaded Iraq in 2003, but Salla takes the Stargate film from 1994 and he wraps it up with a little bit of political intrigue. But, in the movie, we got U.S. military teams using ancient alien portals discovered in Egypt and other places. And the villain was this ancient Mesopotamian god with alien technology and, world powers race to control the gateways. But Salla's scenario is literally mirroring that almost exactly, but it's just substituting Saddam for the Goa'uld in the movie. It's literally the only difference. It's ridiculously transparent.
The Goa'uld are Anunnaki and stuff like that. It's like basically all there. And ancient aliens, right? What are we on season 21? Like it's never stopped. People absolutely love that theory. So if you say, actually, we were going to Iraq for ancient alien tech, it's right in there. It's like that whole market opens up and people love it.
Well, something that makes it easier to digest also is that you have this extra layer of the fact that there has been a UAP cover up for decades and decades. So the fact that that is starting to come to light a little bit really, I guess, maybe reinforces these people and their stories, because all of a sudden it's like, well, we know that something's going on. Maybe these guys are telling the truth. It's just that, it's kind of like, again, latching onto those little nuggets of truth that are really out there, but blowing them up in crazy ways.
The U.S. government has been woefully horrible in public relations. They don't do it very well. So it would behoove them tremendously to get out in front of some of these things and quash it, and release images and pictures of technology that we had in the 1960s that were most likely misidentified, misobserved, and mislabeled as UAP, but they don't do that. And I believe that to this day, the U.S. government and probably other world governments use the fog of UFO and UAP lore to hide actual domestically created human technology that is really advanced to the point where we don't even know what we have flying in our own skies that was built with human fingers.
Right.
100%. I agree.
Is there any sort of secret space program, to your knowledge? I know, like, you had spoken with Richard Dolan on in your film Darcy, and he kind of insinuated that, yeah, there probably is, but it's not what these guys are talking about.
Well, I made like a whole series of documentaries before this called Secret Space UFOs. And on the Apollo manned mission, you had secret space stuff happening even then. Like it's just more subtle than what these new agey secret space program guys are saying. Like they're saying basically Lord of the Rings exists.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas during the Apollo manned missions, Gene Cernan wrote, I think his book was called Last Man on the Moon. And in that, he recalls when I think they were called Black September. They were a terrorist group from the Middle East. They were threatened his family when he went off on his moon mission. And in that book, he talks about how they used a medical line, which was a encrypted private channel that the astronauts could use to send messages and speak like a telephone to mission control, to Capcom. Mm-hmm. And Deke Slayton had this conversation with Gene Cernan about, you know, his worry about his wife and kid while he was gone, and with this threat looming, because they said they might attack his family while he was gone. That right there was an admission that there was a secret communication line. Everybody thought during the Apollo manned missions that it was only the line that you heard publicly whenever they were on camera, like on television, right? But that's not the case. They had secret stuff. And even during the STS missions, the space shuttle missions that were building the International Space Station and doing all kinds of scientific experiments in space, you know, in the film Fast Walkers, we cover that here was the story of what the space shuttle mission was being sent up to do for STS-48 or STS whatever. And it would even say, it says right on the NASA website, often there were top secret payloads that were being launched into space. Mm-hmm. So that is a secret space part of the mission to a public, you know, space venture. So I think there's going to be some kind of practical secret space program. It just doesn't involve bluebird people and, you know, all this other crazy stuff like wars on Mars and
age regression,
you know,
and things like
age
that.
regression, living 20 years in the future and in a special body, super soldiers, whatever. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'll let Jeremy speak to this because I'm sure he can add a lot more.
Well, I completely agree with Darcy. We have classified operations in space. I mean, you have our space plane, which is an uncrewed robotic space plane that goes up for 200 or 300 days at a time, and the general public has absolutely no idea what it is. That is literally and quite technically the definition of a secret space program. But
yeah, the X-37B.
Correct. Yeah. But I'll even take it a step further, and I'll say I don't have proof of this. It's just a hunch. It's my gut feeling that we do have launches that the general public is completely unaware of, because like Darcy was talking about, there was a lot of shuttle launches that carried classified payloads. Now, as time goes on, we've learned that a lot of those payloads were when the astronauts were going up to service NRO satellites, National Reconnaissance Organization satellites, spy satellites. After the shuttle retired, the NRO did not get rid of those satellites. Those satellites still have the work orders. They still break. They still need serviced. How are we doing that without the space shuttle? I don't know.
There must be
I
something.
guarantee you that we're not doing it with blue avions or insectoids or telepathy.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not to say that we don't have some sort of human crewed secret space program that is geared towards servicing and maintaining NRO type satellites.
When you see people like Corey Good or Tony Rodriguez making grand claims that they were part of these clandestine military organizations, as somebody who served in the Air Force, what are the red flags that you spot with some of their stories?
It starts at the most basic levels. When these folks are talking about command structures and they're getting basic terminology wrong, when they're talking about being taken in somewhere, being led by a colonel, that doesn't happen. You get led by a staff sergeant, you get led by an airman, you get led by a private or a corporal. You don't get led by a colonel. When you're talking about equipment, and the equipment just doesn't line up, or the people that are using that equipment aren't the type of people that would use the equipment. It just, to a normal civilian, and no offense to the general population of civilians, because you don't know because you've never experienced it. It's like watching a bad B-rated television show where they have somebody wearing an army uniform where all the patches are on the wrong side of the uniform.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, when you're in the military, all these little things, you look at it, you see it, and it just, that they didn't have a good military advisor. That they're screwing up the uniform so they don't get caught impersonating an officer. All these things when you're watching a show, and it's the same thing when you hear these guys talk about, well, this was the protocol. No, that's not how this works, because in the military, we live and die on redundancies. We live and die on protocols and doctrine. And when you're talking about, oh, there's only this one piece of equipment, and if this piece of equipment fails, the entire mission would fall apart. That's not how the U.S. military does things. We run with the rule of, if you have two pieces of equipment, you only have one. If you have one piece of equipment, you really only have none. So it's ludicrous the way that they describe even the most basic of things. It's just bunk.
Darcy, the way that you presented, these alleged whistleblowers in the film, it had a very comedic touch to it. Like, you're obviously poking fun at them in some way, but I would imagine the way the interviews went, you were pretty straight faced. It seemed like you were conducting a serious interview. Was it set up that way? Like, were they under the impression that you were like really interested in the stories that they had to tell? How did you initially enter the interviews with them?
We both were, all of us were speaking at a conference in Palo Alto in Silicon Valley. So they were there, and I told them I'd love to speak to them about their story, and they signed off. They signed a NDA saying that they were cool with me publishing it and everything. And I think, like, at the end of the day, people are going to believe what they're going to believe. And I'm going to present it the way I think about this stuff. If they want to live, with this story in their lives, and by all means, like, it's a free world. The West, for now, is safe enough that you can walk around and do this, and no one's going to bother you. But I wish them well, and I think at the end of the day, they are nice people, and I was nice to them. But their stories are what we document and how that slips into the overall secret space program lore. So, it's just food for thought for people that don't know about this, or if they're deeply entrenched in this universe, they can pull their head out a bit, take a look at the full bird's eye view, and really decide from there.
Yeah, I appreciate your skepticism, and because it's not always the kind of sexy thing to do. You know what I mean? Like a lot of people like the fantasy element, the more outlandish things. It's exciting. You know, you get a bit of a dopamine hit when you hear those things, and I think that's attractive to people too. But you know, your dedication to calling calling out bullshit, I think, is pretty admirable.
Thanks, man. Not everybody says that, but it is what it is. We're in 2026, and some people will believe what they believe to their own detriment. And I'm just trying to offer, I think UFOs are real. I think there is a possibility that non-human intelligence has come to the planet at one point, and maybe our government does know about it. But this sort of spin, this expanded universe, it just reads more like fiction to me, and entertainment, rather than being based in some kind of factual reality that we're living. That's just my opinion. And I don't mean anybody harm by saying I don't believe that other stuff.
Yeah, I want to get into more hard UAP facts with you guys, but just to finish up on the film, these guys, comparing the story of Corey Goode, Tony Rodriguez, and Chris O'Connor, like what were the similarities and differences between them?
Well, there's quite a few differences. First of all, I've said this before, but Randy Kramer was like the first guy to really publicly speak on camera about this with Kerry Cassidy's Project Camelot.
Mm-hmm.
So we should thank him for the secret space program / super soldier lore. And then that was 2014. Corey really only started fully coming out in 2015. Comparing himself to those other three, if you see him speak today or even 2 years ago, he'll say they're all liars. I am the only true teller of this story.
Mm-hmm.
And he's had legal battles, and he's basically calling it all his intellectual property and saying that Gaia TV stole it and owes him money for every time they mention his copyright or trademark stuff that he did after he left the company.
Mm-hmm.
But then you go to Tony Rodriguez. We have photos from the first conference that Corey Goode presented at in 2015, and Tony Rodriguez is right in the crowd there. He's right in the audience smiling, and Michael Salla and all the other players that were building this universe are right there too. So Tony Rodriguez kind of became the new big player in that space after Corey and David Wilcock left Gaia TV. Tony's story is very different because his is very dark. He says that he was like a space slave, and he was raped, and all of these very dark themes by aliens. And then he also said, he was originally enslaved by an Illuminati Republican that was punishing him because he bullied the Republican's son in school. And this was like the way that they got justice. They threw him into a child. I mean, it's the thing is, right? Like even today, we have this truth that there is a powerful pedophile network around the world, right? And there's a lot of that truth coming out in the news right now that maybe a certain president was involved, and other really infamous people tied to Epstein. there's a reality of this type of horrible stuff happening in our world. I firmly believe that. But wait, there's more. And then it's connected to the secret space program and, you know, all of that. So it's like an expansion of, again, what's real life history, real life events. And then it's, you know, this alien stuff that's happening. Maybe the aliens are pedos. You know what I mean? It's pretty wild stuff. And yeah, then you go on from there to Chris O'Connor. Chris O'Connor says that he essentially kind of like worked in this Galactic Federation, United Nations role, and was kind of a therapist to people or aliens and yada, yada. It's pretty interesting. Very different again. None of this like sort of dark, you know, evil in space and demonic storyline, more like love and light. And that's really, there's a lot of that in the UFO community. You have a very strong contingent of people that believe aliens are angelic, and there's that love and light crowd that think they can pray the aliens to come and save us and heal us or whatever.
Yeah.
I can give tons of personalities that are in that camp. Mm-hmm. And then you've got, and I'm sure you could too, Rob. And then you've got the kind of like dark, you know, Space Wars saga people that say, you know, aliens are demonic and it's all evil. And we're in this Illuminati world where at the top of the pyramid, the aliens are ruling everything, right? So that's the secret space program sort of lore. You got both those draws that people are really focused on.
Right. And so after Corey Good's deposition, where he basically admitted that it was all fabricated, did that slow down the SSP movement at all, in your view?
Yeah, I think it did. You know, even Richard Dolan in the documentary talks about that there was like a wave, and that wave kind of got broken around 2017, 2018. But that's where you have like Jason Rice, Tony Rodriguez, and all these other guys kind of entering the fray and filling that sort of secret space program power vacuum in this sort of entertainment world, in my opinion. I will just ask one question. Jeremy, have you looked into JP, the supposed military guy that wore a dirt bike helmet for a lot of his career so far?
No, I honestly have not. There have been so many people that have come out lately that I've started digging into. He is on my list to start researching, but I have not done any respectable research on him yet.
Okay, because he claims to have a military background, but I don't know if we can prove that in any way. I don't know.
Oh, next film, Darcy. Look into that guy.
I don't think so. We'll see.
Let's shift gears to you know, some of the more credible UAP you know, topics that are being discussed right now. Jeremy, I know that you have had a UAP encounter in your career. Can you tell us a little bit about that? What was that like, and how did that kind of like steer your interest in the subject?
Yeah, to start with, I've had 3.
Okay.
And to put things in context, I am in defense contracting. I am a technical writer. I interface with subject matter experts on anything from encryption protocols to weapon systems to zero trust architecture to anything that the company that I'm with is submitting a proposal for. Prior to that, I worked as a defense contractor with a drone company that built, flew, and handled the payloads for like the RQ-9s, MQ-9s, various alphabet agencies, and I wrote operation manuals for those, things like that. So I'm very, very familiar with things that we have flying in the air that a lot of other people are not. However, even with the knowledge that I have, the very first thing that I had ever seen is the reason that I'm sitting here today. It's what thrust me into this whole conversation. I was in Jordan, the country of Jordan, back in 1995, and we had an exercise that involved the 75th Ranger Battalion, Navy SEALs, Naval Special Warfare. I was Air Force Security Forces. We even had Department of Energy and FBI deployed to the country of Jordan. At the time, it was just billed as an exercise. Later, through testimony of John Deutsch in front of Congress, we find out that that exercise was not an exercise. It was actually a joint Jordanian and U.S. forces coalition that was intercepting stolen fissile material that had come from the former Soviet Union. 95 is only 4 years after the fall of the Soviet Empire, and overnight, country fell and nation states sprang up, and a lot of these nation states had nuclear weapons. And because the economy was gone, nobody had allegiance to the new country that they were in, these commanding officers were trading nuclear warheads for bottles of vodka. There was over 600 pilfered nuclear missiles and nuclear warheads that were stolen, that most were accounted for later on. But my job at the time, I was taken out in the middle of the Jordanian desert with one other person, and I was told to guard a crate. And when I say a crate, it was just this giant wooden crate, giant meaning you could park a Volkswagen Bug inside this crate. No markings, no nomenclature, no nothing. I was simply told, don't get near the crate. Don't let anybody else get near the crate. And of course, we're out there for days, no supervision. And we get on the crate, I lay on the crate, took a piss on the crate. But you get bored out in the middle of the desert. And there was one night, back then, I chain smoked, basically. And I walked away from post a couple 100 meters to go have a cigarette. And as I'm fast forwarding through a lot, but as I'm lying on my back on a sand dune, just smoking a cigarette, I remembered that I had my night vision goggles. So I took my night vision goggles and I put them on, and I'm just laying back there looking at the stars. And I don't know if you've ever seen through night vision goggles at night, but you can see tens of, maybe even hundreds of thousands of more stars than you can with your naked eye. And the middle of the desert, it's crystal clear. There's no clouds, there's no precipitation. So it's cloudless night. And we were in a no-fly zone, so there's no aircraft. And due to the mission that we had, we knew when all the satellites were going to be passing over. We had charts telling us, when to go hide under the tents so they couldn't get a good body count. But I'm laying there on my back, just looking up at the stars, and all of a sudden I see something. It shot from my 6 o'clock position, came straight over top of me, top dead center, executed a perfect 90-degree turn, and shot off to my 9 o'clock. And I'm like, the hell was that? And you've only got about a 40-degree field of view when you're looking through night vision goggles. But when you're looking at the cosmos, 40 degrees is a lot of space. So I'm laying there and I'm like, what the hell was that? And all of a sudden I see it again. And it just shoots up, top dead center, shoots off to my 9 o'clock. And it repeats over and over again. It's just this pinpoint ball of light. And I take my nods off and I hand them over to the guy that's there with me. He's smoking a cigarette too. And he's like, what do you want me to look at? I'm like, just put them on and look. And he's okay. He puts them on and he's laying there and he's looking up, and I don't see any reaction, nothing. And the next thing I see is his head drop down and swing to the left. I'm like, yep, okay. He saw it. And then he just took the nods off. He handed them back to me. He packed his cigarette and walked back to post. Didn't say anything else about it. And of course, I couldn't report it because I had walked about 100 and some yards away from what I was supposed to be guarding in the middle of the night. So I couldn't walk up to my CO and say, hey, Captain, when I was dereliction of duty there, I saw something that I have no explanation for. But like I said, to this day, even with the operational knowledge I have of aircraft and drones and payloads and satellites for my daily job, I have no explanation for that. I have no idea what the hell it was. And that's one of three.
Okay, so well, let's get to the other two. But I'm just, if you had to speculate now, what is it, three decades later, about what that was, has anything changed with the way that you regard it? Do you think that it's possible that it was a human-made craft with the information that you know now?
That one, I cannot comprehend how it could have been a human-made craft for one reason and one reason only. It was the execution of the perfect 90-degree turn. There was no arc, there was no curve, there was no radius, there was no visual, measurably visual depreciation in speed. It was as if you took a laser pointer and just drew a right angle in the sky, just without the beam of light. It was just the dot, and it just a perfect 90-degree angle. And a manned craft cannot do that because aircraft have to bank and they have to keep the forward momentum. And then, it's a curve. I don't know of anything that we have that uses aerodynamics for maneuverability that can do a perfect 90-degree turn. I can't imagine something that can do that even in microgravity, even in low Earth orbit. I can't see something being able to do that without a depreciation in speed. It's something I cannot wrap my head around.
All right, so let's move on to sighting number 2.
Sighting number 2 is one that kind of makes my skin crawl a little bit. Happened right here, right outside that window. I live in Las Vegas in a little suburban area, but still within the Las Vegas metropolitan area in a little housing development. And my daughter at the time, I think she was 6 or 7, she was learning how to skateboard. The sun was going down. It was January or February. It was cold, but she wanted to go outside because the neighbor kids in the cul-de-sac across the street were out riding their bikes and their skateboards. So she wanted to get her skateboard out and go over there and play with the neighbor kids. So I grabbed my jacket and I walked outside with her. She's in the cul-de-sac and I'm just kind of standing on the sidewalk. And I don't know, maybe 20, 30 minutes goes by and I start getting really cold and I wave at her. I was like, hey, it's time to go home. And I turn around and I start walking across the street to get back to my house. As I step off the curb and walking in the street, I'm looking both ways for traffic because I want to make sure she's not going to ride her skateboard out into traffic. And I hear her skateboard go off the curb of the sidewalk. So I turn around to look. And as I look at her, I just kind of glanced up in the air. Right over top of my neighbor's house was it's indescribable, really, but it was a ball of light. I don't know how big it was because I can't judge the altitude of it. It could have been 70 feet in diameter and 7,000 feet up, or it could have been 7 feet in diameter and 70 feet up. I don't know, but it was the most brilliantly white light I have ever seen in my life. It was not looking at the sun. It was probably an order of magnitude brighter than what looking at the sun is, but it did not hurt my eyes to look at it. It cast no shadow on the ground because there's trees out there and street lamps and telephone poles, and there was no shadows. And here in Las Vegas, it's a desert. The air is always full of dust. And if I open up the blinds over there and you look at the street light out there, you can see the street light shining through the dust. There was no dust trail. There was no nothing. It was just light without effect. And I grabbed my cell phone, which I always keep in my pocket. And the cell phones, since day one, have always had, I don't know if you can see it, but they always have the flashlight and the camera button down here at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I grabbed my cell phone and I went to go take a picture of it. I could not get my finger to hit the button to open the camera. I tried, and every time I went to go hit the camera button, my finger would move and I would hit the flashlight button. I was willfully looking at my finger, trying to move it to hit the camera button, and I couldn't do it. And then it either started to shrink or it started to move away. No sound, no nothing. And I'm having the most difficult time remembering if my daughter saw it or not, because this was, 6 years ago, and she was like 6 years old at the time. And I don't know if we had the conversation, hey, honey, did you see that? What was it? Or if I'm misremembering it. But nobody else seemed to see it. Nobody else seemed to react to it. But it was the weirdest thing that I could not take a picture of it.
Wow.
Sounds like you saw an orb.
Yeah.
No
and to this
explanation.
day, your daughter doesn't recall that sighting at all? There's no recollection?
She remembers me talking about it, but I don't want to rely on that because it's a 6-year-old remembering a 6-year-old conversation, and I can't be sure that she's not just remembering the conversation instead of the event.
All right. And then there's a third one, more recent than that?
Third one, kind of similar. I do astrophotography. Not very good at it, but there's a place north of here, close to Creech Air Force Base, Indian Springs, where they fly the drones and such. And this one, I can maybe have a guess on it, but I'm out on the top of a hill, and I've got my camera gear set up, and my camera gear is pointing towards Las Vegas because I'm using the light pollution of Las Vegas to add color and add kind of a gradient to the bottom of my astrophotography. So my camera is pointing south, and I turn around, and like I said, I'm on the top of this hill, and there's 2 mountains in the background, 2 giant mountains. So I'm looking directly through a valley, and I just turn around so I can kind of get my eyes away from the city light and get my night vision and stuff back. And as I'm looking out there, there's another intense ball of light, but there's no clouds again. And then the light just goes whoop, and it goes away. I'm like, okay, it's probably like a 747 or something coming into McCarran Airport or Harry Reid Airport. I didn't think much of it. I turned around, look at my camera gear because I'm doing time-lapse photography, check on the gear. It's fine. I turn back around. The ball of light is there again, but now it looks like it's maybe only a quarter mile away from me. No sound again, just a ball of light. I'm like, okay, that's weird. So I'm looking, I'm watching it, and then it just gone. And then maybe 2 seconds later, it comes back, but now it looks like it's maybe 200 or 300 feet away from me. And I'm like, nope, screw it. I'm done. I grab my camera gear, don't even take it off the tripod, throw it in my truck, drive off the hill, and I'm gone.
So it was a sense of fear that you were feeling in that moment. Well, what was the sensation like?
It was, the guys at Creech Air Force Base are probably flying a drone and screwing with me, but they do carry arms, and I don't want to be accidentally shot. Okay. That was the first thing that goes through my head, but 20 other things go through my head at the same time. So the skateboard incident is still replaying. So I don't know. I mean, I can almost eliminate that one as being prosaic because I am close to Creech Air Force Base. They do fly some classified stuff there. I mean, Area 51 is just 45 minutes away from where I was at. Mm-hmm. It could have been easily domestic terrestrial stuff because it didn't do anything that defied physics. It didn't control my finger. It didn't make a 90-degree left-hand turn. It just scared the crap out of me.
Wow, those are great stories. Yeah, I mean, I feel like that those are the types of sightings that people commonly recall having, like more so than, we have the testimony of pilots and things like that, and they align with those types of sightings. It's often an orb or something that's making very precise movements that would not be physically possible with conventional aircraft. And when you see people testifying in front of Congress, recollecting similar events? Like what goes through your mind when you see that?
A lot of the times I have a problem with terminology and speech pattern. When people get up there, and if you listen to this recording again, you'll hear me say, I can't explain it. I don't know what it was. I can't think of anything that could do that. And that's the God's honest truth.
Mm-hmm.
But when you have people that get up there and say, this is impossible, it is not an aircraft, it is not a satellite, they don't know that. They don't definitively know that. And when somebody makes such a definitive statement, such a definitive claim, I tend to start to tune out. For all I know, I could have been having a mini stroke at the time that I was trying to hit the camera button and not doing it. So I can't say that I was being controlled by an alien ship. I can say what I saw. I can say what I tried to do and was ineffectual at it, but I can never truly link the two of them together. So when I hear somebody else saying, you know, this beamed thoughts into my head, or, you know, it gave me a feeling of whatever, that's their interpretation of an experience. Sure, I get it, but I can't put a lot of faith into it because it is such a definitive statement, and there could be 2,000 other things that could account for it.
Right. So the possibility is that they're connecting dots that shouldn't be connected, or, you know, there's not enough, you know, the level of certainty in the statements doesn't align with the actual facts of the events, basically.
I would have a much better time if somebody went in front of Congress and said, I saw something out the cockpit window of my aircraft. It trailed us. We talked to the FAA. They couldn't identify it. It wasn't flashing an IFF signal. We have no record of it. Our sensors didn't pick it up. Our aircraft radar didn't pick it up. This is my story. But when they say there was a non-human intelligence controlled craft that paced my airplane, that's where I'm like, you don't know that. Mm-hmm. You don't know that that's what it was.
Okay. Darcy, you sound like you wanted to add something to that.
Well, no, I was just going to say, like, anecdotally, if you looked at, you know, like Ryan Graves' testimony, mm-hmm. or David Fravor's, you know, both had UAP encounters in airspace while flying. Do you believe their testimony, and do you think that they, you know, believe that it's something not from our American arsenal?
So Ryan Graves never saw it with his eyes. He only saw the radar return or the sensor returns. He never visually saw anything.
No, but he says that he saw a cube within a sphere that went between his wings and his other, you know, pilots'
that
wings.
Came out after his original story. To my knowledge, that came out after his original story. His original testimony was only that he had, I mean, there are videos of him out there saying that he never laid eyes on anything. And the story seems to have morphed and changed a bit over time. With David Fravor, I have a high suspicion of what Fravor saw. But again, when Fravor is out there saying, hey, it rendezvoused with us at the cap point, and it couldn't have done that because nobody knows what the cap point is. Those are definitive statements that are actually wrong, because they were doing an exercise and they reused the same cap point for the 3 days prior to that. Everybody knew what the cap point was. Everybody that had flown 3 different squadrons out there had known what that cap point was. And I have a strong suspicion that what Fravor saw, especially with the difference between Fravor's testimony and Dietrich's testimony and time and altitude and behavior of the Tic Tac object, I truly believe that the 2004 Nimitz encounter, the Tic Tac, was an untold blue on blue exercise where the Nimitz battle group, the Nimitz carrier, had just had a retrofit of its Aegis radar station. And I truly believe that we were testing our own equipment against our own capabilities to see what our own vulnerabilities were.
If that's the case, and a craft like the Tic Tac, which also David Fravor, he has testified that it did some incredible things, moving at incredible velocity and performing maneuvers that he didn't understand. Where would technology like that come from, and why wouldn't it be more known about? If the United States was able to develop such craft, how would they be able to keep it a secret?
We have a very compartmentalized military industrial complex. There's no one person that knows everything, and that is simply by design. We can't risk one single source of everything that we have defecting or being captured or getting dementia. So we compartmentalize everything. And a lot of these things, you have Lockheed Martin, GDIT, SAIC, Boeing, McDonnell Douglas, all of these defense contractors who are vying for contracts. Quite often, they are building outside of a contract. They are developing outside of a contract. And then they will go up to the Pentagon and say, hey, General so-and-so, we've got a new weapon system that we want to demonstrate for you, or we've got a new aircraft prototype that we want to demonstrate for you. And it's the first time that the military has seen it. So not everything is built and operated because of an existing contract. Quite often it's built in the hopes of a contract. So it is entirely possible that, with Lockheed having hangars out at Area 51 where it's just their personnel going in and out, there's a back room somewhere where they've developed something that nobody else knows about except for their engineers.
All right. So supposing that, these are human-made craft, and they have been coming to light more in the public since, I suppose, 2017. That was the Nimitz incident. No, that happened in 2004, but it was revealed in 2017 with the articles in the New York Times. Since then, it's been almost a decade now. There's been increasing coverage of this, and the public is being made more and more aware. Do you think that that's by design, or is it just a symptom of cracks forming in the secrecy, or is there an intentional disclosure that's happening right now?
I don't know that the answer is yes to everything. There is an intentional disclosure, but it's not necessarily, in my opinion, for the reasons that most people think there is. We have a very long history and a time-honored tradition of doing what is called intercept intelligence. And it's basically, we suspect that there is a leak somewhere, or we're testing to ensure that there is not a leak somewhere. So we will slip in a patent, or we'll slip in a document that is a completely falsified report, and we'll wait 5, 10, 25 years to see where it pops up, because it's already been tagged and it's already been marked, and we want to know which pipe it came out of. So a lot of these things, you look at Salvador Pais's patents, you talk to any other type of physicist and they will tell you it is mathematically impossible. They don't work. But those patents came out, a few years ago, 2020-ish, 2019, and they went wildfire everywhere. And people were saying, oh, this is confirmation of reversed alien engineering and things like that. No, my opinion is that is a symptom of intercept intelligence that got out, and somebody probably got fired over it.
We're coming up to an interesting event. By the time this episode airs, it will probably be behind us, but the UAP Detection and Tracking Summit is happening on February 7th and 8th. And I feel like that's relevant to what we were just discussing, because the data is what's going to tell the story about these things. You mentioned, eyewitness testimony. It can only take you so far. People's stories are not necessarily reliable. They're subjective, but you can't argue with raw data. So what's the key to getting more information about these sightings, these craft? How can we move forward with more valuable information?
Time. And to put this in perspective, John Greenwald had filed a bunch of FOIA requests to the CIA for information on 3I Atlas. And the CIA came back with a GLOMAR response saying we can neither confirm nor deny that we have any documentation on 3I Atlas, which is a space rock. So why would the CIA classify or use a GLOMAR response and say we can't confirm or deny that we have anything? It's a rock. Why would the CIA do that? Because it's not about the rock. It's about the method of data collection. The CIA cannot come out and say, hey, here's some photographs that we have of this completely benign giant rock, because it would show, A, that the CIA had an interest in it, which is intelligence in and of itself. The photographs would show that the CIA was looking at it. So our foreign adversaries would go, well, what were they looking at it with? And then they would study the evidence. They would study the photographs. They would study the distance between the lens and the rock, and they would be able to assume orbits and altitudes and things like that. And it's not anything that we're ever going to put out. So time is the only way that we're going to get anywhere. And I hope it's within our lifetime. I hope that technology catches or goes so rapid that things that we have in place 10 years ago are declassified in another 10 years because they're completely and totally obsolete. But until the point that our methods of data collection themselves are declared obsolete, we're never going to see anything that is actionable from the public's understanding of what reality is actually is. What is flying in our atmosphere? Is there anything flying in our atmosphere? Because the people that own the satellites, the people that own that telemetry, the people that own and design the sensors, they don't want anybody else to know what the capabilities of that equipment actually is.
We often talk about this through an American lens, but it's a global phenomenon at the end of the day. And what do you think the chances are that a lot of these sightings are actually foreign made, and that they aren't part of the U.S. inventory, and they may belong to China, Russia, or any other developed country that with advanced technology?
If I was to have answered this question 5 years ago, I would have told you untruthfully, because I would have had to, that there's no chance in the world that Russia or North Korea or China is flying anything within our airspace. However, because we now know that China infiltrated the United States and Canadian airspace and circumvented NORAD with balloons, it is now completely known that foreign adversaries operate aircraft within our airspace. But it's so much more problematic than that. There's a reason that we have banned the operation of DJI drones, because these drones themselves are suspected to have backdoors that feed information right back to the Chinese state. We have shipping containers sitting in ports with foreign-made surveillance equipment, with drone aircraft that have sneaked through ports in Philadelphia, New York, and Los Angeles, that are just sitting there waiting for somebody in a donut shop to get a phone call from an overseas number or a number station or something that tells them to walk to that container, open it up, press a series of numbers, and launch something. It's the reason that we have radiological helicopters that fly over Times Square. It's the reason that we have surveying aircraft from the NSA flying over Los Angeles during celebrations. You're going to see it coming up with the 250th celebration of the United States' birthday. You're going to see so many unmarked helicopters and black ops circling our skies looking for radiological signatures and all sorts of craziness. And right around the time that we start celebrating our 250th birthday, the amount of UAP sightings is going to skyrocket, because people are going to be seeing us looking for foreign adversarial technology flying within our airspace.
Is that what actually happened with the, you know, the drone,
New Jersey
mass
drones?
drone, yeah, the New Jersey drone sightings, which was the explanation, the official explanation for it? Was that legitimate? Is that what we witnessed?
When you have people that believe the Earth is flat, and they look up in the sky, and they cannot tell the difference between a hole punch cloud that is formed through a very benign atmospheric phenomenon and an alien portal, these folks are going to look up and they're going to see a helicopter that is just turned in the right direction so they can't see the front and the rear strobe. And they're going to see it moving away from them at a diagonal and then making a circle, but they can't tell that the light is getting smaller or bigger just because of the nature of the curve. And they're going to go, oh, that defies physics. How is it doing that? It's an alien ship. No, it's New York Port Authority. It's everything that was seen in New Jersey is, of my opinion, absolutely benign domestic tech misidentifications and mass hysteria.
I have one final question for both of you before I wrap it up. And and not to set expectations, but I feel like I'm going to get slightly different answers from both of you. So I'll start with Darcy. Where do you see the disclosure movement heading within the next couple of years?
I wish I had a crystal ball and I could predict that. I think you're going to have the same amount of people that use speculation and sensationalism to drive their own circus of sales. So that's going to keep happening. And I think the public is getting smarter, and you will see. Look, I think people like Ryan Graves and David Fravor saw anomalous activity. And I think, for that matter, Jeremy has seen anomalous activity. I just worry about the people that say, but wait, there is more, and attach a book and, sensational claims get verified by just trust me, bro. There is a galactic federation, and, Donald Trump is going to announce to the world that they're going to save us or something like that. Those people I worry about. The people that say I saw something that was anomalous, by all means, based on my own logic and what I know is possible, I trust those people. And I think there is UAP activity, and I think disclosure is one part sensational entertainment and one part we all want to know if we're alone in the universe or not. And I think it's mathematically and probabilistically pretty true that we're not alone in the universe. It's just who is here and what are they really doing? All that stuff is where people fill in the gaps. And I'm open. I want to know more. I just want the facts.
Right. Jeremy, where do you see the disclosure movement heading in the next few years?
I think that we're going to see something shift radically. I don't disagree with anything that Darcy said, but I think, and I am actually hoping to a point, so far, every whistleblower that has come out, I wouldn't even call them a whistleblower, because none of them have come out and said, here's the evidence. They've all come out and said, here's a story.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping, kind of, that within the next 5 to 10 years, there will be an actual legitimate whistleblower. And I don't think it's going to be an engineer from Area 51. I don't think it's going to be somebody that worked at the NSA as a intelligence analyst. It's not going to be test pilot. I think it's going to be somebody probably from like the government accounting office that is looking at a pile of numbers and they're going, what the hell is this? And they chase down a rabbit hole and they uncover a program, a legitimate program that just absolutely throws light on maybe reverse engineering or maybe domestic tech that is just so far outside of our current understanding of where we think we are that it just blows our minds, because they pull an Edward Snowden and they release the data. They don't go to Congress. They don't go to Gaia TV. They don't go to Twitter. They go to whatever version of WikiLeaks happens to exist at the moment. You know, they go to NBC and say, here is 275 pages of irrefutable evidence that has names, telephone numbers, desk numbers, and evidence of exactly what I'm going to tell you. I think that that's probably going to happen, because as we move forward in time, we're looking at, you know, the Gen Zs that are going to be in this position. They're going to be sitting in those desks. And these folks did not grow up saying the Pledge of Allegiance. They didn't grow up saying America is number one. They grew up in a time where it's perfectly okay to take a crap on the country that you live in. So they're not going to have the same kind of allegiance to their job or to the program that the current or past generations have had. And I'm fully expecting somebody to come out with a book of business and say, here's everything that we've ever wanted to know.
And probably not, they wouldn't have the same level of fear also, because that's what's holding a lot of people back now from, providing more complete testimony, is that things are still classified and there's fear of retaliation. And we hear stories about, from the past, like people who testified in front of Congress have talked about the ways that their career has been affected and things like that. So yeah, there's a lot of pressure on people to keep their mouths shut still. And I hope to see that alleviate as well as the years go on. I want to thank you both for your time. It's been great speaking with both of you. Before we wrap it up, is there anything that you would like to leave our audience with? Any messages or information about your work or anything else, Jeremy?
The only thing that I wanted to touch on, because I think it's extremely important, is if we go back to Michael Salla for a moment, his entire Antarctica mythology, with its supposed Nazi breakaway civilization, fraternizing with tall, blonde, Nordic-looking aliens. This is important for people to understand, because you have to recognize that this is repackaging 20th century racial fantasies and wrapping it up in science fiction drag. His narrative is literally elevating specific white Aryan aesthetics as biologically and morally superior to everybody else on the planet, but he's projecting it into space, and then he launders it as this cosmic destiny rather than an ideology like the Nazis had. So he's portraying these Nordics as advanced, benevolent overseers, while us other humans are remaining ignorant or inferior. And the story is normalizing hierarchies that mirror the Nazi racial doctrine without the overt slogans. It's what I call softcore racism. It avoids those slurs. It avoids any of the calls to actions that the neo-Nazis have, but it's reinforcing that same white supremacist assumptions under the cover of UFO lore and pseudo history. And it's sick.
The Nordics it's a common archetype from people who talk about different alien species. Is that, do you think that it's that racial element that you mentioned, is that the root of every I guess source of hearing about this race of alleged aliens?
I think Darcy would probably be more in tune with the answer on that one.
Yeah, I think Nordics are spoken about with multiple different storytellers of the past, but then you've also got tall whites. That's a Charles Holt, story. And I think there's so many of these, like, kind of like there's white blondes that are better than all the other humans, it seems to be a bit problematic. I mean, you ask somebody like Michael P. Masters what that person, that experiencer saw, and he'll say, maybe that was us from the future and they were coming off of a time machine. You know what I mean? Like, you never know, but I don't know the answer completely as to whether it's like this neo, like kind of drag Nazism stuff hidden in the UFO discourse, but it's possible. I mean, a lot of these Nordic tales started in the Space Brothers era with George Adamski back in like the 1940s, 50s, you know, so post World War II. And it just, people just keep kind of reusing that stuff. I don't know if it's completely false either. So, I don't know. Maybe.
I've got to flip it back to Jeremy and just ask this other final question. Do you believe that there's a possibility that we're being visited by non-human intelligence?
I would say it's a non-0% chance. I mean, the statistical probability itself that we are the only life in the cosmos is infinitesimally small. The idea that we're being currently visited, I don't know. I would, part of me would love that to be real, but then the other part of me looks at the state of this world and how utterly screwed up we are, and thinks that if there is something out there that is so significantly more advanced than us, they've got to be assholes if they're not helping us now.
I really like that answer. And I wish a lot more people would just say, I don't know. Because, you know, that's the way that I feel about so many things. And I'm not shy about it. But everybody's so certain with their answers. And it's refreshing to just hear an I don't know once in a while.
True.
Well,
I wish I knew. I tell people all the time, I believe, but I don't know. And I want to know what it is that I believe.
That makes a lot of sense. Darcy, do you want to wrap it up with anything? Remind the audience where they can see your work, your films. What are you working on now?
Yeah, sure. This new film, Dark Alliance, The Next Generation, you can click in the show notes and the details, and Rob will provide a link for you to watch it from anywhere it's live right now. And I have a new podcast that's audio only, UFO Review. Go check that out on Spotify, Amazon, Apple. Basically, I'm going back and talking about my whole filmmaking journey in this space. I've produced over 20 feature-length films now, and I'm just going to talk about what happened when I was making them, the people I interviewed, my theories, what's possible in my mind, yada, yada. So yeah, check that out. And you can search my name, Darcy Weir, on Tubi TV, Amazon Prime. A lot of my films are free. And follow me, Occult Journeys, on Amazon, on Twitter, X now, and Instagram, Darcy Weir Films, Darcy Weir everywhere else. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. It's been great to speak with both of you guys.
Rob, thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
All right. And this is just my little reminder for the audience that Unveiled is available on all streaming platforms as well. So you can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, we're there. So until next time, take care, everybody. Thanks for joining us today, and be well. See you next time.